You were made as well as we could make you.
But not to last.
The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long, and you have burned so very, very brightly.
Hello once again, and welcome, wherever you may be. I'm going to read a longer passage today, where Beelzebub describes the origin and the formation and the meaning of souls within the megalocosmos, or the universe. And I will return to India at the end. After the actualization of the vast divine was completed, our triumphant cherubim and seraphim gave for the first time to all the newly arisen concentrations the names that exist even today. They defined every relatively independent concentration by the word cosmos, and to distinguish the different orders of arising of these cosmoses, they added to this term a specific corresponding name. The most holy prime source sun absolute itself was named protocosmos. Each newly arisen second order sun, with all its definite results, they called the deuterocosmos. Each third order sun, which we now call a planet, they called tritocosmos. The smallest relatively independent formation that arose on the planets, thanks to the new inherency of the fifth stopinder of the sacred Heptaparaparshinok, and which is the very smallest likeness of the whole, was called microcosmos. And finally, those aggregates of microcosmoses that also became concentrated on the planets, this time thanks to the second order cosmic law called mutual attraction of the similar, were named tetatocosmoses, and all those cosmoses that together compose our present world were called the megalocosmos. And the names given to the emanations and the radiations issuing from these cosmoses of different scales, by means of which the great common cosmic trogo-auto-egocrat proceeds, are the emanation of the most holy Sun Absolute, as I have already told you, they called Theomertma or Word God. The radiation of each separate second order sun they called Mentoki Fetsoin. The radiation of each planet separately they called Dynamumzoin. That given off from the microcosmoses they called Photoinzoin. The radiations issuing from the tetatocosmoses they called Hanbledzoin. The radiation of all the planets together of each solar system they called Astroluo-Lucizoin. The radiation of all the newly arisen second order suns taken together they called Polorotheopal. And the aggregate of the results issuing from all cosmic sources, great and small, they then named the common cosmic Ansanbaluiazar. Everything issuing from everything, and again entering into everything. And now, my boy, after everything I have just explained to you, we can return to the question of why and how the highest being bodies, or as your favourites call them, souls, began to arise in our universe, and why our unibeing common Father turned his divine attention particularly to these cosmic arisings. The point is that when the common cosmic harmonious equilibrium had been established and regularized in all the cosmoses of different scales, then in each of the Titata cosmoses, that is, those relatively independent aggregates of microcosmoses that had their arising on the surface of the planets, where the surrounding conditions accidentally corresponded to certain data present in these cosmoses, enabling them to exist for a certain period of time without sequuano, or in other words, without constant individual tension. The possibility appeared of independent automatic movement from one place to another on the surface of these planets. Thereupon, when our common Father Endlessness perceived this automatic movement of theirs, there arose in him for the first time the divine idea of making use of it as a help for himself in the administration of the enlarging world. From that time on, he began to actualize everything for these Siddhartha cosmoses along such lines that the inevitable okrualno, that is, the periodic repetition in them of the completing process of the sacred heptaparaparshinok, could be accomplished in such a way that under the conditions of a certain kind of change in the functioning of the common presences of some of them, they would be transformed and crystallized, in addition to the crystallizations that had to be transformed for the purpose of the new common cosmic exchange of substances. Also those active elements from which new independent formations could be coded in them, with the inherent possibility of acquiring individual reason. That this idea arose then for the first time in our endlessness, we can also hear from the words of the sacred canticles with which, at all divine solemnities, our cherubim and seraphim extol the marvelous works of our Creator. I must tell you first that the functioning of the common cosmic Iraniranumaj is harmonized in such a way that all the results obtained from transformations in different cosmoses localize themselves together according to what is called the quality of their vibrations, and penetrate everywhere throughout the universe, taking a corresponding part in both planetary and surplanetary formations, and generally the temporary place of their free concentrations is the atmosphere, with which all the planets of our megalocosmos are surrounded, and through which the connection is established for the common cosmic Iraniranumaj. And thus the effect of this divine attention directed towards these Titata cosmoses was that, while serving as apparatuses for the most great cosmic Trogoautoeocrat, the possibility appeared in them that from among the cosmic substances transformed through them, both for the needs of their most great common cosmic process, and for the needs of the process of their own existence, the latter substances composed exclusively of cosmic crystallizations derived from the transformations of that planet itself, of which these Titata cosmoses arose, results began to appear in their common presences such as proceed from cosmic sources of a higher order, and composed of what are called vibrations of great vivifyingness. And it was from such cosmic results that exactly similar forms began to be coded in their common presences, composed at first of the common substance Mantoki Fetsoin, that is, of substances transformed by the Sun and the other planets of that solar system within whose limits those Titata cosmoses had the place of their arising. In this way, the common presence of certain Titata cosmoses then began to be composed of two independent formations, coming from two entirely different cosmic sources, and these formations began to have a joint existence as if one were placed within the other. Well, my boy, when these new coatings were completed and began to function correspondingly in the presence of the Tetatokosmoses, from that time on they ceased to be called Tetatokosmoses and were called beings, which then meant two-natured, and these second coatings were named Kesdjan bodies. Now, when everything corresponding to it was acquired in the new coating of these two-natured formations and all the functioning proper to such cosmic arisings was finally established, these new formations in their turn, on exactly the same basis as in the first case, and also provided that there was a certain change of functioning, began to absorb and assimilate cosmic substances issuing directly from the most holy Theomotmologos, after which similarities of a third kind began to be coated in them. These coatings, which are the highest sacred parts of beings, we now call highest being bodies. Later, when their highest being bodies were finally coated and all the corresponding functions had been acquired in them, and above all, when it became possible for the data for engendering the sacred functions of objective reason to become crystallized in them, data that can be crystallized exclusively in the presence of cosmic arisings of this order, and when what is called raskuano occurred to these Tetatokosmoses or beings, that is, the separation from each other of these differently natured 3-in-1 formations, only then did this highest being part receive the possibility of uniting itself with the cause of causes of everything now existing, our most holy Son Absolute, and begin to fulfill the purpose on which our all-embracing endlessness had placed his hope. This language is something else. I do have the sense of being slightly lunatic reading it out. But if you are familiar with the language that is used in the fourth way, you will recognize that this is an incredibly marvelous and detailed explanation for the formation of entities within our universe. An explanation that you would never find in what we call modern science. In fact, the whole world as it is today, people live, they enjoy their life, and perhaps they do useful things, but they don't really know why. And I think it would very much benefit the human beings of this planet to have at least some guidance. Jesus, for instance, says, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," and other such wonderfully inspired sayings. But these aren't the kind of technical, basic sense of the world that would benefit people today. Even with a good heart, it is quite difficult for modern people to accept those ancient guidances when perhaps they just need a simple orientation of what they are and why they are here. The main problem for human beings today, and particularly with a view of the massive expansion of all that stuff in the head that the modern crop of people experience, is that people receive different types of intelligence that are functioning simultaneously. So they see the world through the heart, through the body, and through the false self in all its craziness. And they have all these different signals coming through that are not fused into one. That is the problem, and that creates the chaos of the world. And the main job must be to fuse them into one and to dissolve anything that is false there. That is the job, and that needs to be carried on as part of your life. This morning over breakfast I was comparing the physical structures, to my vision, which is like a wide field and a sense of receiving the environment through this incredible transmission of light. It's so incredible. Vision is so incredible. How can it even be explained? as vision opens up, it's not even a sense, and it's not about light, because as vision is born, so a new part of you exists. It's not a sense in the sense of something machine-like. It is the birth of a new life. Vision is received or stimulates some aspect of the higher being body. There's an expansion that experiences the vision. Something else I was contemplating this morning that seems important to me is projection. I think people recognize what that means. It means that you may be a person who finds themselves to be very bothered by certain situations, and that sense of being bothered just comes back and back and back. And you know that it's something inside of you that's triggered by various outside conditions. For instance, dogs might trigger that in some people, or the boss might trigger it in other people. And the trigger is an environment that is similar enough, that resonates close enough to trigger the inner feeling. It's not exactly the same, because you project onto something that is similar enough. Do you see? And it allows you to see outside yourself what is going on inside. It can be used that way. You can use your projections and your conflicts with the world to learn about yourself, because otherwise it would be sort of buried deep inside and you would never really know. And I believe that in higher worlds, projections, or this interaction where you see something within yourself outside, this still occurs at all levels of reality, even in higher levels, but there is more fidelity. At the level of ordinary men, the resonance of your projection with the environment might be really quite dissimilar, but enough to trigger you. If you were in a higher world, it would be closer, because there is more precision, because there is more intelligence in that world. And my real point, the thing that I'm really trying to express, is that our lives, for instance, when you go to work, you're actually internally, there is flow of energy through the different centers, the mental, the emotional, the physical. When you're sitting in the office or you're in a machine shop, whatever you're doing, these energies are flowing together. In that context, when you're treating patients or leading a meeting or fighting a war, is a context for you to express this energetic transformation that is happening inside of you. And that is really what your work is. But the way people are today, they can't understand that. So then we have these things called jobs, which allow everybody to see what's going on clearly, but distantly. That's the level of evolution of human beings today. And people believe that having lots of money or the possessions in the outside world are really going to determine their future, but they only determine a certain part in this environment. The real future is according to what you have learned inside and what transformations are actually possible for you due to your sincere struggle with life and the growth of your inner powers. In the following passage from Siddharameshwar, he uses the word mind to mean what an ordinary person experiences inside of them. Voices, noise, words, some coming from themselves, some seeming to be random. A sort of soup of things. And the self. by which he means the resolved and completed being. Siddharameshwar makes an interesting point here about the precipitation of material from the self into the mind that creates a double. What is the difference between the mind and the self? That which is laden with curiosity and which is occupied with speaking is called the mind, whereas that which is conscious of everything is the self. Existing quietly on its own, the self alone is conscious of everything. No entity other than the self ever exists. When the self approves of the existence of something, it becomes a concept, and when it denies, it turns into a doubt. It is the mind that conceives all doubts and concepts. The mind is full of concepts, whereas the self is free. The self is the ultimate resting place. That which remains after forgetting everything is called rest. There is bliss in the forgetting of everything. That which remains after giving up the distinctions such as I and you is bliss. After giving up pride, one can enjoy undifferentiated happiness. If there are two, then there is pain. When there is only one, there is bliss. Thank you for listening, and I wish you a lovely week. Take care.